All right, we're back with another episode of Bruise News, episode number 3. We don't break the news, but we talk about the broken news. So, as you can tell, Paul Fontaine, James McDaniel is here as well, host of the AEW podcast on the Fight Game Media Network, The Boom with Kevin Eli. How's it going, James?
Garrett, thank you for having me here today. I thought you were going to say we don't break the news, but we definitely do bruise it. I want to apologize to everybody. My laptop is in the shop today, but I'm coming to you live from my iPhone. I'm excited to get the day started talking some wrestling with you guys.
Yeah, and we'll get to some MMA too. I have a couple of MMA things that I want to
ask
both of you guys about near the end, but we will hit the wrestling stuff first. Paul, what a week for you, huh?
Oh yeah. It's you know what? I saw the best and worst of social media this week. Mostly the worst, but
the worst is saying something, Paul.
But you know what? You do. I found out I have a lot of good friends and a lot of support, and that was cool. And you just take it in stride and you try to look at other people's perspective of things. And I had no issue with CM Punk. For people, I'm sure people watching probably know all about this by now, but he reacted to what he thought was a troll. And you know what, I've talked about this a few times. There's one thing I remembered today. I actually responded to Punk. I forgot that I had. Yeah. And what I said was, you know what? I wasn't familiar with the early part of your Arch career. I'm a big fan. I love this feud with MJF, and I missed Excalibur's entrance. And shortly after that, he deleted his original tweet. Now, some people say he deleted it because he was getting flack. Maybe he saw my response and deleted it. I don't know. But
so let's actually go there, because
sure.
As a peruser of the internet, I've seen all of the blog posts written. James even showed us a really cool Wrestle Talk video written or done about the whole situation. So I guess my first question is because if I was doing a story on the situation and I'm Beauregard from WrestleFest.com, I would go and find you and see like what the deal was and how you felt. Did any reporters want to talk to you about what happened before they decided to write about it?
No. I mean, and yeah, I saw a bunch of different articles that were written and that were quoting my tweets. I mean, it kind of reminded me of last year. Some people might remember that my daughter, Becky Lynch saw a tweet that I made about her, and she responded, and a whole bunch of different websites wrote stories about this. Not a single one contacted me about it.
Wow. And so this time too, zero?
No, not a single one.
Wow.
But I will say the guy from Wrestle Talk, I mean, if I would have talked to him, I don't think I would have said it any better than how he put it. Some of the other ones were basically, I'm not going to say any of the names because number one, I don't want to give them any publicity. And number two, I don't want to throw shade on them. But
yeah, right.
I mean, these articles were like, I mean, the writing is fine, I guess, but there's like zero research that went into it, and anybody could have wrote that.
Yeah, 100%. And that was mostly my question.
Yeah.
To you, which was, did you think any of that coverage was unfair? Because not to say that you are not a fan, but if they would have just Googled you, they would have noticed that. You write for the Wrestling Observer. They would have noticed that you do a couple different podcasts.
They all mentioned it. And
the first one that I saw said fan.
Yeah, but then when you read it, you saw. So, I mean, I think a fan was clickbait maybe. But they were all like fair, and, like they didn't really come at Punk too hard. They didn't really come at me too hard. They said, like some people said he should have Googled it, but then he went on to explain why he didn't. Or waited for Excalibur's explanation. And again, I fast forwarded through Excalibur's explanation. Totally my fault. One prominent reporter who easily could have got a hold of me had an opinion on it. And, I talked to him after the fact, and he explained it wasn't about me. It was about all the people that were making this an AEW versus WWE thing. Yeah. And saying that AEW didn't do their job and they're not catering. They're catering to like a small subsection of fans. And that's just BS. So they did a great job with this. That was an incredible story. Like, let me make that clear.
Yeah.
The Punk thing was awesome for long-term fans. And I wish I would have got it.
Here's how I correlated what had happened to you now.
Sure.
I am not a comic book reader. Our good friend, Jeremy Feinstone, is a massive comic book reader. So when I go and watch those Marvel movies, there are things that he's looking for that I don't even see coming. I don't even really know what they mean, but the movies are well done. I get something out of them. I'm more of a casual fan. I'm like, wow, that movie's awesome. And he may get a little bit more out of it because he knows the background. He knows the research that he's done. He knows the story. And so if they have a little Easter egg for him, he's like, oh my gosh, that's what I was looking for, right? So that's kind of what I thought about in this situation. If you were an old school ROH fan, and really, you know, when people talk about that, I couldn't even be an old school ROH fan. They never came to the West Coast.
No.
They were never on TV. It was all DVDs that you would get 3 and 4 months later. Now, I do have some of them, but there's no way that I could have followed that product. And, you know, I had wife and kids, and like that wasn't like the where I was just searching for pro wrestling content right that time. But so I'm not mad at myself for not knowing. I'm just like, how could I ever know? Like, it's just never going to be something that I knew.
But here's the question. Could you be a movie critic and review the movie that you just watched without having that back knowledge of
100%?
Comics?
Yes.
I think you could. Yeah.
100%.
So for me, like, I would say, you know, for that situation, like, if it was me and I was curious about a certain reference that maybe I heard like a bunch of people gasp in the theater, you know, so maybe I get on thinking, yeah, I could Google it and find out, hey, what was this about? Or I could just ask my Twitter followers, say, hey, can someone explain to me the significance of X? You know, and the guy's name probably is X. And someone would explain to me, probably Jeremy, you know. But if I Google it, like maybe I'm spelling the name wrong. Maybe I'm not asking the right question, you know. So, you know, that was my thought process behind what I did.
You know, Paul, when I saw the tweet, like I saw the tweet right when you made it, I think I reacted to it, but I didn't think anything of it because you were simply asking a question, and I know you, and I knew it's a genuine question. The thing is, I wasn't an old school ROH viewer. A lot of my friends are. So when we knew CM Punk was coming to AEW, there were a lot of discussions. What's his theme music going to be? Is it going to be such and such from WWE, or is it going to be AFI from ROH? So I looked it up back then. That's the only reason I knew. But I think if I hadn't known, I would have just thought, this is a cool, different thing. It's a different outfit. Maybe he's doing a little bit of a Demon King type thing. And what you did is you simply asked, what am I missing? Because you knew immediately some people are reacting to something that I'm not understanding. And to me, that was the most innocuous tweet. Like, it was just a simple question. I never imagined this would blow up. So the Wrestle Talk video I sent y'all like a couple days ago, I saw it and I was like, this can't possibly be about Paul, can it? And then I finally watched it last night. I'm like, it is. And then I realized, oh, this isn't just blowing up in like our group.
No, there's
this
like a Reddit thread
everywhere.
There's like a Reddit thread with like 20,000 upvotes. Like,
you're a superstar this week, my friend. Yeah, I'll give you that. It cannot have been fun as it was happening because
it was fun. It was fun.
Was it? I'm glad to hear that. I'm really glad to hear that.
Yeah, because I just muted the people, you know, the eggs with like 43 following, 0 followers. I just didn't pay attention to those people, and it was cool.
I ended up in a pretty long discussion at one point with Jonathan Snowden and
I saw that.
And Anthony Evans formerly of the UFC about how all three of us legitimately like go to Dave's tweets when he posts AEW ratings and find out people that we need to delete now before we need to delete them in the future. And it made me feel so much better. Learn like all three of us were actively doing that.
That's hilarious.
Like hitting the trolls before they could hit us.
Okay, Paul. So you listened to the I did it again. The Bryan Danielson interview. I didn't do that on air though. I was very scared of doing that.
I would have.
You listened to it, and there was a large focus from him on social media. Right? He made this big thing about, you know, maybe we should get off social media a little bit more. The problem with your tweet, and there's not a fundamental problem with you tweeting. The way Twitter works is you're not just tweeting to your followers, right? You're tweeting to the people who follow your followers, who follow the followers of the followers, right? That's how Twitter works.
Or anyone on the hashtag AEW Revolution.
So when I suggested to you that, you know, you could keep it in our group, or you could put it in the Slack or whatever. It was because of that part of it, which is your friends will see it in the more private engagements. But, Twitter's Twitter. It's also more fun to use Twitter during live events. One of the favorite things for me when I watch a UFC show is to follow with Twitter, because I'm seeing everybody's scores and I'm seeing how everybody looked at a specific round. And it's kind of fun when something goofy happens, and then, you make a joke and you see people are kind of enjoying the show the same way as you. So I get why you want to do that on Twitter. But, I personally, I didn't know either. Here's how it happened at Dave's house.
Yeah, okay. I want to hear this.
So we're watching it, and we're waiting for the song, just like you. We're waiting for Cult of Personality, right? And so it doesn't happen, and we all kind of looked at each other. And one of our good friends, David Rubio, he immediately knew what it was. Jeremy, I think Jeremy either knew what it was or he was following, Twitter, the right people who knew what it was. And Dave knew what it was, but Dave didn't know what the song was called. So, we're sort of Googling the spelling so that he can tweet about it or write about it or whatever. But John and I clearly didn't know. And I laughed because there was this kind of you have just this room of people, and it's almost like who knows and who doesn't know. And I thought it was cool because I was like, oh, for the ROH fans, and I even tweeted this at you and John. I said, this was so fantastic for the people who knew. And what it also did is it sort of validated the ROH library that they just bought.
Yeah.
Now who knows? I'm sure Tony will get that song cleared I'm sure he got it cleared for the live show. Who knows if he would get it cleared for a DVD or for streaming or whatever. But it just validated oh, this is a real thing, and we're throwing it back, and Punk is throwing. So I thought all of that stuff was brilliant. I wasn't bothered that I didn't know. I was just more yeah, if it was something that happened in 1997 WWE that they threw back to, I would be like, oh my gosh, who doesn't know this? But that's just because that's when I was following a little bit more closely.
The Edge Brood thing, when he, sure. Yeah. That's why I asked the question, what am I missing? I'm not saying what are they not showing me. I'm saying what am I missing?
Yeah, your question was formed around you, not it was a you, not a them thing.
Exactly. But I can totally understand people looking at oh, what am I missing? It's all your perspective and what you think the person's trying to say, as opposed to looking at what they actually said.
I fully believe Twitter is the absolute worst, but I also love Twitter specifically for live events. I like live tweeting along with shows. I actually got started way back in the day with Survivor, was where I got used to live tweeting. Yeah. And now it's
started
MMA
a new
wrestling.
Season.
Exactly.
If you filter it, I'm sure you do, James,
it can be wonderful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But there's always people that are going to slip through those filters. But I did think AEW handled it well, having Excalibur hit pretty quickly what this is, why it's special. And Paul, there's no way you're the only one who missed that. There's so many people that were going to the bathroom, getting a snack, fast forwarding, whatever.
Well, and the thing is,
they handled it as well as I think you could.
When I heard the fake out, the first Cult of Personality, I assumed Punk was coming out. So I fast forwarded through it. And so when MJF was sitting in the ring, I thought Punk was already there.
MJF really faked you out, Paul.
Oh yeah.
Good work on his part.
Yeah. So I was just confused,
All right. So we'll move on.
Yeah.
I just wanted the people to hear it from the horse's mouth, because nobody decided to reach out to you when you're very easily could have slid into the DMs. Everyone's quote tweeting you. They may as well just slide in the DMs and ask you what the heck was going on. So that's why I wanted to do that. All right, let's move on. So Jeff Hardy shows up on AEW Dynamite on Wednesday night. I popped for the music. It was kind of one of those great moments of whoa, they got the music. I died laughing when he was running down and dancing. I cracked up so hard. But James, Jeff Hardy in AEW, does it do it for you?
I was a little excited about it, and I think one of the reasons is I think a lot of people are thinking, oh, he's a throwback guy, but this is a guy who's was still a top guy in WWE just a couple of months ago. I think Matt Hardy needed something to refresh his character. I was completely sick of HFO, AHFO, Matt Hardy. And clearly part of that was the build to this, as in his whole thing was falling apart. I'm excited to see where it goes. I got to say, I thought it was done a little sloppily by AEW. It was just kind of thrown in there at the end. I absolutely cracked up when he comes out doing his dance and like thrusting as his brother is just getting destroyed in the ring. And I thought that's just, to me, that's classic Jeff Hardy. And I honestly, I've never seen anything more poorly done by AEW that I ate up so completely. So I was all in.
And now we realize that probably Jericho and also William Regal went over on time. So there was a rush to get through some of that stuff.
Yeah. When I saw, I specifically saw that early this morning about the people going over on time. And that made a lot of sense. And that explains so much. And I think that's a lot of times in the past when I've been critical of AEW for maybe leaving something off of Dynamite, I later find out, well, the Young Bucks ran long or Cody ran long. So that stands to reason.
All right, Paul, you made a tweet about the dream match that could be made, and you had people guess, and man, you get so much engagement on those tweets. I was like, wow, there's like 20 people replying to this thing. Good job, Paul. And so we do have a comment from our good buddy Scott Edwards, who does the Joshi show on the Patreon, and we're going to get Scott on this show in particular as well. He says, and I figured Paul would be the best person to ask this, who are you hoping to see Jeff Hardy wrestle with in AEW as a tag team and as a single?
So a lot of people thought that I was getting at Hardys and the Bucks. And I do want to see Hardys and Bucks on a big stage. You know, I've already seen it in ROH. I think I saw it on an indie somewhere. So I do want to see Jeff Hardy and Matt against the Bucks. I do think the money with them right now is as a tag team, but I do think Jeff Hardy's going to get a singles run down the road. I'd love to see Jeff Hardy and Darby Allin.
Yeah, they set that up, didn't they?
Yeah, and I think we're getting a Hardys. See, I think what they're going to do is do an 8-man tag, Hardys, Darby Allin, and Sting against probably 4 members of Andrade's group, and then eventually we're going to see Hardys against Sting and Darby, and that's going to be awesome. So that's what I want to see.
Yeah, I think you're right, Paul. And I think it has to be Private Party and Butcher and the Blade. Most likely, those are the 2 tag teams there. Clearly, the Young Bucks came to mind as a throwback to that one. I think it was the one match they had in ROH back in the day, right
WrestleMania
before
weekend.
Yeah, right before the Hardys made the jump on WrestleMania.
All right. Well, what was their theme music during that ROH match? Do you know the answer to that question?
I do not know the answer to that question.
I'm just kidding.
There's so
Super
many.
Kick Party.
Like I've been thinking of all the tag team matches I would love to see. Of course, Young Bucks. Of course, I would love to see them against the Lucha Brothers, FTR. There's so many matches. But then you asked solo matches, and my mind has just been over here reeling. My brain hadn't gotten there yet, Garrett, and it's still working on that question.
You know,
I wanted to say a pop for Jeff Hardy's music, and someone said, I didn't understand it, Paul Fontaine. That was great.
I absolutely was. I was so surprised they got that music. I'm so surprised WWE didn't have that locked down in some way. I don't even know exactly how you lock down music that you didn't create, but man, I was impressed with that.
Yeah, I think that's what was in the Observer this morning, that it was just available. So, okay, so here's another question. And Jeff Hardy, I think there is a ceiling with the Hardy brothers as a team. They will go through and they will be very meaningful, and they will wrestle all these other teams, and it'll be very cool. But as we've seen over the years, Jeff is actually more marketable as a single than he is as a member of the Hardys. Now, that was Jeff 5 and 10 years ago. Jeff, this is not the same guy. And so I'm wondering with you guys, how long do you think, and we'll start with you, James, how long do you think they'll go with the tag team, knowing that there might even be more money in Jeff as a single?
My completely uneducated opinion on this, Garrett, is about a year. As in AEW, you can, in my mind, that they'll do 2 or 3 major feuds, and there'll be some time off in between. We see a lot of that in AEW where guys will just not be there for a month or 2, and you don't know if they're injured or they're just nothing for them at the moment. But I think you're right. I think they need to make that move, and I'm curious to see if they're going to make the move with Jeff versus Matt first. It's been done before.
Oh, it's always sucked though.
You know, and I'm hoping they don't. I'm hoping it's just a more of a natural him feuding with someone else, going for a belt or whatever. But I'm really excited to see it as it happens.
Paul, any thoughts on that?
It just occurred to me, and I'm glad no one's commented it yet. There's big. Oh, there's my cat. There is big money in a CM Punk Jeff Hardy feud.
Oh yeah,
when Punk turns heel, and Punk even brought up Jeff Hardy indirectly in his promo a couple weeks ago. So I that's the one I want to see now.
Okay, so wow, there we go.
This is the best wrestling show I've ever participated in.
It's
I have to say that right now.
It's a literal cats and dog fight.
Oh, I wish Paul had kept it going.
Casa de Fontaine.
For
okay,
real.
so just the people who are listening, you couldn't see it, but Paul's cat and dog started to play with each other, and so he cut off his video so that he could take care of business.
And it was great. It was great because if you're listening to this on the podcast, you need to go watch the video on YouTube because you can see this slowly developing behind Paul. And I was watching this whole thing as it broke out. Also, I'd like to point out to the listeners, Paul is currently drinking a 96-ounce cup of coffee. It appears to be multiple gallons.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so one more question, and this I haven't really seen this covered. We love seeing Jeff Hardy in AEW. We love seeing him wrestle, but he did get released from WWE, as far as we know, from failing to go into rehab. I think is what he had said.
Right.
Are you? Do you think that is part of this story? I guess I feel a little bit like when it happened, I thought AEW should actually say no originally to Jeff Hardy because you're creating this like weird atmosphere where, he gets fired for being under the influence, possibly. I mean, there was this whole thing about him wanting to know the test results and all that stuff, but to then just be like, okay, open door, that we saw this happen in the Monday Night War, right? WCW and WWF, they're just trading guys back and forth, and some of these guys are messed up, like Scott Hall. Not saying that that's Jeff Hardy right now, but right. I do think it's a little interesting how, are we supposed to forget why he was fired from WWE? Does this part of the story mean anything to you, James?
I was initially very concerned about that, and I thought if this is true, if it was due to drug abuse, there's no way Tony Khan can bring him in. And I give AEW a lot of slack on issues like this because they've been a very trustworthy company to me so far. And between and of course there were the denials by both Matt and Jeff that it was in any way drug related, and I take that with a grain of salt. That's what anybody would say in that situation. But I have a feeling the drug test must have come back clean from the way they've addressed this, from the way they've made jokes about it.
Yeah, and that's also what I wonder. Elite.
Yeah, and I think it has to be. I don't think they're going to be joking about the Young Bucks tasting the man's urine on BTE if it didn't come back clean. And I've honestly wondered a little bit, was this whole thing, was the whole walkout a little bit of a work on his part because he was just done. And he said when he walked away from the ring in WWE, he just realized in that moment he was done. And that might be maybe the most true statement he said in a long time. I think there's a real possibility of that. And so I'm just leaning towards that being the truth right now, considering the way AEW's handled this.
And Paul, you are somebody who is very sympathetic to, this type of situation. And, what do you think similarly as James that this would have had to been, sort of a mistake on their end or
on WWE's, you mean?
Right.
So when this first happened, my initial reaction was there's no way AEW can pick this guy up.
Yeah.
And but then, when I heard what happened and maybe he didn't fail the drug test, I still thought that WWE was justified in firing him for unprofessional behavior.
Sure.
Walking out in the middle of a match,
yes,
seeming disoriented, like they don't know what's going on. So they fired him. All accounts are they tried to bring him back. He wasn't interested in going back. So at that point, it's fair game. There's money to be made, and Tony Khan's a businessman, and his fans want to see the Hardy Boys, so he brought him in, and so I got no issue with it. Now, given what originally happened, yeah, I mean, if he would have come in like the next day, obviously he couldn't, but I probably would have felt a little bit differently. But as soon as that music hit, it was just like, okay, this is wrestling, and sorry, boys, cool.
Yeah, and it's quite possible that his breakdown could have been an emotional breakdown or a mental. Yeah. And so I guess for me, what I wanted to hear from AEW, or what I wanted to hear from, somebody in that company, say he didn't fail that drug test, and that's why we hired him, rather than let us sort of try and put the dots together.
Leave us to work it out on our own. And one thing I want to say is I am very critical of the WWE a lot, probably more critical than most. And I don't have any problem with the fact that they fired him because of his past.
Yeah.
I think they absolutely made the right decision for them when it comes to risk management, that sort of thing. And I just want to point that because it's one of the few times I'm not being critical of WWE. and I think you're exactly right, Garrett, that AEW should have made a bigger deal if everything was clean, and they were able, and there was evidence of that before bringing him in, because we're not the only people having this discussion today.
Sure. All right. I think we can definitely move on to the next topic, and we will go WWE here. I know Paul thinks that sometimes we overlook the E, and we are not going to do that right now, because one of the bigger stories that came out, and let me see if I can find this correctly. I'm actually trying to, let me see. Nope, that is not what I wanted. I was actually looking for, we're seeing us right now. I was actually looking for the Stone Cold Steve Austin, the video that he put out, he and WWE put out on, what was it, Tuesday morning, in his response to Kevin Owens. Here we go. The video's playing. People can see it. I'm not going to turn the audio up on it. Those of you who are listening, we're just playing the Austin video in the background while we talk about this. So we had, it had been reported, and Dave reported it, that it was possible that they wanted him back for a match. That was the big news. Stone Cold Steve Austin is going to come back. He's going to have a match. And it has now turned into the KO show and Austin showing up and answering at WrestleMania, not necessarily for a match, though we would imagine something is physical. Paul, you were hoping to attend WrestleMania. Does the fact that Austin is not in a match take away from your anticipation of the card?
Not one bit. I just want to be there when that music hits. I want to see him hit a stunner. Like, that's it. Like, whether he has a match or not, that's all anybody wants to see. So that, as far as I'm concerned, just the fact that he's there and you're getting a stunner, that's it. That's good.
But haven't we seen that a lot? Because the promotion is that he's been, waiting to come back for 19 years. But let's go back to Dallas. What would it be now? 6 years ago.
Yeah, I was there.
We saw that, right?
Yep.
Then you can go back to WrestleMania 20. We saw that. You can go back to WrestleMania 21, and we saw that. So this is part of my frustration with the promotion, is that if you are a longtime fan of WWE, we just have to be okay with them lying about the situation.
Well, okay, like, here's the thing though. Did they lie? Like, I mean, I know that Dave reported it, and I'm sure he had the sources.
No, I'm not saying that they're lying about the match. I'm saying they're lying about him not having been here for the longest time, right? Like, he has. This is his deal.
Sure.
This is what he does every single time.
Yeah. So for me, like, if they were selling it as Stone Cold having a match and then all we got was KO show, then I'd be pissed off.
Yeah.
But the fact is they're advertising it. A lot of those other appearances, they weren't advertised. So here, you're getting it. There, you might have suspected. I'm sure everybody going to Dallas probably thought we were going to get Stone Cold. I didn't think we were getting The Rock that time. So that was a nice bonus for me.
Yeah.
And so, if Cena shows up at WrestleMania, I'll be happy because they didn't advertise it.
James, is this something to be negative about with WWE?
I don't think so, because I think it's something they clearly wanted to make happen and weren't able to. And I'm kind of happy about it, because earlier this year, or back in summer of 2021, I saw a couple different kind of new documentaries that involved Stone Cold, and I saw some where he was wearing sleeveless shirts, and I thought, I don't want to see this guy in the ring. Like, he didn't look great, and I don't want to see Stone Cold who doesn't look good, and he's the one guy I think maybe in wrestling history, maybe along with Hogan, who you can have just pop up randomly for an appearance, deliver a stunner, and everybody's excited, where you don't need the match. You don't need all that. It would have been cool if he was in good shape for it and he was ready for it. But if not, I still think again, every 6 years is okay. Even if you feel a little deceived by WWE over the 19 years thing, it's just exciting that he'll be there.
And I said this last night on the Fight Game podcast. I don't want to be a hypocrite because I was against him wrestling because I was like, oh no, I'm so worried about him actually getting in the ring because of the injuries and stuff.
Yeah.
If they could have figured out a way to make it really safe, I think I would have been comfortable with it. But now just them saying he's just going to do an appearance, and I'm like, oh, we've seen that already. But my favorite Austin appearance at WrestleMania. So it's WrestleMania 25 in Houston. It's Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker, the first match. Or the first match in their two match series at WrestleMania. And the whole weekend was also about Austin because he goes into the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame ceremony sucked because they put a time limit on everyone's speeches. And so I'm at that WrestleMania, and that WrestleMania is not great. Save for that one match and maybe a couple of other things, it's kind of a disappointment live. But when they did the Hall of Fame announcement, and they obviously left him for last, he didn't do the thing where he came out, at least I don't remember, where he comes out in the tuxedo like everybody. Or maybe he did, and then he goes back, but they play the music, and he drives the little four-wheeler down the thing. And I was like, okay, that was the moment that I've been waiting for. So that was my favorite one. Hopefully we get something very similar to that at this year's WrestleMania, because I think we're all giant Stone Cold Steve Austin fans here.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's stay on the WWE lane here. Cody Rhodes. Dave reported in the Wrestling Observer that his road to WrestleMania was going to be with Seth Rollins, but now that it is on hold because negotiations between Cody Rhodes and WWE have stalled for whatever reason. I heard a couple of different things that you would sort of point the finger at him for them stalling. I've heard something where you point the finger at Vince for the stalling. I'm not sure what the exact reason is. I'm just, he probably thinks he should make more money than they're willing to pay him. That's all negotiations is what I probably would guess. But James, does Cody Rhodes showing up in WWE at WrestleMania, having this big match, does that do anything for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a big deal just because he's a founder of AEW. He's one of the former EVPs. I think that is a big deal. I'm not sure how all WWE fans will react to it. I think a lot of them still see him as a little bit of a mid-carder, and they're the people that would claim that all of AEW is nothing but mid-carders, with a few exceptions. But if it happens, I am absolutely into it, and it's one of the things that will 100% guarantee I'm watching WrestleMania for sure.
All right, Paul, I know you're trying to put Seth Rollins in the ladder match for the NXT show. I know that's your side booking there, but is Seth Rollins the right guy for Cody in his sort of re-debut at WrestleMania if they actually pull it off?
That's such a difficult question to answer. I mean, it's the only guy, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right guy. I don't really know who the right guy would be. Like, Miz seems like it would be a good feud for him. Triple H, if he was able to go, other than that, I'm interested in seeing Cody in WWE, but there's nobody that I can really look at and say, oh, I can't wait to see Cody versus so-and-so. I know Cody and Seth will be a great match, and that's why they're going to do it. And if that's all they're going to do is just book them in these feuds, Cody and Edge, Cody and KO, Cody and Sammy, whatever. That's where I'm the only reason they're signing him is because he was an AEW exec. I don't think they actually have any plans for him.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because if we've said this from the beginning, we probably even said this on this show, but if you are trying to create the idea that the grass could be greener on the WWE side of things after Bryan Danielson, CM Punk, John Moxley. They've proved the other way works too, right? That the grass can be greener outside of WWE. If WWE wants to say, no, for those guys, yeah, but the grass can still be greener on this side, showing that through Cody Rhodes is uber important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that I've seen a lot of people saying, and I think it's a good point, is that WWE would put him in big programs if they were paying him the type of money it would take to get him there. And I think that is true initially, but I just think with Vince McMahon, and it doesn't matter what Vince thinks when he signs him, his mind is going to change on the daily. His mind will be changed a month later, 2 months later, 3 months later. And I do think if they do sign Cody Rhodes, he will come in a big program worth watching. And then I still truly believe in 3 months he'll be Stardust again, and it'll all be for naught, you know. And that's one of the also, like, I'm still in the camp. I don't think he's going to end up signing. I don't think he's going to end up there. And if he does, I do hope it's in big programs. I think he deserves it. I think he's proven he's a guy that you can put that kind of faith in, but I just don't have faith that it will be carried out long term.
Okay, well, let's stay here because you said something that I can't imagine working out for him if he thought that leaving AEW was the right decision, which is you're saying he doesn't go to WWE. So there's something else that could be out there for him. If it's not WWE and it's not AEW, is he even in wrestling?
That's the thing. That's the thing. And it's one of my big issues with the whole story from the beginning. And I said this on the Boom this week. Cody Rhodes is a dad for the first time in his life. He has a little girl at home. There's never, I think, from my experience with new fathers, there's never a time when you're more concerned about money and about stacking cash for the long term. And he and Brandy, by leaving, have given up so many paychecks, EVP paychecks, wrestling paychecks, Roads to the Top paychecks. Between the two of them, we're literally talking 5 to 7 paychecks. I can't imagine making that decision to not take whatever they were offering unless you already have something that locked down with WWE, because nobody out there can pay you that kind of money to make up for all those missing paychecks other than WWE. I don't think he's going to go to New Japan. I don't think he's going to want to leave his little girl behind in America for extended periods of time. And and this is a very unpopular opinion. I'll probably get dragged for the rest of my life for it. I still think there's a possibility that the whole thing could be a really, really elaborate work. And I know no one agrees with me on that, and I'm cool with it. I'm totally cool with it. But just because it doesn't make sense to me why he would leave unless he already had that locked down, because he was on AEW TV for a couple of months without a contract. And if you're out of contract, you can be negotiating. This is something that should have been negotiated months ago. And for him to be sitting at home without all of this different income coming in, to me, that's just really, really suspicious.
If this thing is a work, we're never believing anything ever again.
And to me, I think it's possible that he ends up back in AEW, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a work.
Right. And I agree. I think that's a possibility as well. And I'm not saying it's 100%. I'm just saying if this is true, then it's one of the two biggest works of all time, along with Brian Pillman leaving WCW with his fake release that was actually a real release. I do think it's something unprecedented. I'm not saying this is a normal thing. I just think the facts to me don't add up. It seems like a bad decision, and this could very well just be Cody made potentially a bad decision, because if he has just kind of slammed the door in AEW, then he has no real negotiating position with WWE anymore, because there's no one else, again, in wrestling that can pay him that kind of money. The only other thing he could do was go heavier on shows like the Go Big Show or do something outside of wrestling, kind of like what began this question, Garrett. And it could just be Cody made a terrible decision.
I do have a story that I hope I don't get in trouble for telling.
All right.
Which is after the show with Bryan Danielson and Dave and I, we were just kind of talking off air. And Bryan said that, Bryan doesn't know anything about the Cody situation. Like, he was very adamant that, like, he knows less than, what Dave knows.
Right.
And so he said that he sent Tony Khan a text, which said something to the effect of, I have this great idea. how about Cody comes back and he runs ROH? and he said Tony Khan wrote him back something to the effect of, yeah, I received 1,000 of those.
Because Brian's not online. He doesn't know that like 8 million people have already come up with this idea.
That's hilarious.
I cracked up. I was like, that's perfect. That's exactly what you would expect from Bryan Danielson, because he's living what he said, which is stay off of social media. I'm not even on it. It's my manager who runs my social media. So I thought that was pretty funny. Yeah, let's not. I don't think people will aggregate that or anything. We'll keep it between this audience.
One thing I want to say, because DJ Convoy asked a good question: who does a work benefit? And so, if it was a work, and I don't think it is, I think it benefits AEW because it makes it look like Cody chose AEW over WWE. He had an offer from WWE. He was going to take it, and then he said, "No, I'm going back to AEW."
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, I don't think that's what it is, but that could be the answer.
And I think there's a lot of good stories that could come out of it. And I think that's the thing. It would just benefit the storytelling, as in maybe a way to make him come back in a way where he doesn't think he's a heel, but to AEW, he's a heel. I think there's a lot of options there. And again, I'm not saying this is 100% what I think is going to happen. I'm saying I think it's a possibility because of the strangeness of the decision-making from Cody Rhodes.
All right, let's move on to two really small things I think worth mentioning, and I'm sure James, you will probably talk about this a little bit on the Boom. Paul, you may talk about this on the Dynamite show, which is on our Patreon, which is the AEW ticket sales are doing very well in some markets, in the new markets, right? The LA market in the Forum, it looks like they put up, I don't know, 6,000 or something. I think they sold those tickets. There's still a bunch of sections that they could then sell. I think somebody mentioned Detroit as well, first time market. It's an interesting kind of thing to where they hit these markets so consistently. Chicago, Florida, there's some places in Texas that they've run a couple different times, because it seems like if they would just be open to go to more places, you go the first time, it's going to be hot as hell. LA has shown that. They have not yet come to the Bay Area. And I kind of wonder about that strategy. Now, I don't know how to sell tickets. I don't know that entire business. If Dave would always talk about the great Zane Breslov, like I wish we had his him to be able to ask these questions. But what do you guys think about that strategy of like almost overrunning some markets, and then you see the houses? They hide it very well on TV, but you see the pictures online where they're like, oh, there's not that many people there, versus just like, why don't we just hit all of these new markets? Unless there's data. I'm sure there's data. I'm sure Chris Harrington has data that says we may not be as hot in this market as we think we are. But Paul, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the ticket stuff, but what do you think about that strategy?
I think it seems like it's working. It makes it feel real hot. I mean, when I first got the news about the Forum, I'm like, oh wow, like I can't believe they sold out that huge building. And then, then I look into it and it's like, oh, okay, they didn't sell like 17,000 tickets like I thought they might have, So, but I do think that perception is there. Whereas all you hear about WWE is, 18,000 seat building and they sold 2,500 tickets. So it makes it seem, but then when you actually look after the fact and look at the ticket sales, they're actually pretty close, which is a really strong feather in the cap for AEW, but it's not like it appears sometimes that AEW is like outselling WWE like 3-1 or something.
Yes. So, I think you would, if AEW came to, where you could go easily, like you'd quickly buy
within
tickets.
8-hour drive, I'm going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about you, James? Have they been near you yet?
They've been fairly near me. Like when they come to Texas, they're not far. They're about to come to New Orleans for the first time, which is really, really exciting. That was supposed to happen earlier, and I think it got canceled because of the pandemic. I think the entire idea of that they've basically picked a couple of major markets and they've just ran them to death, like squeezed all the juice out before going to these other major markets like Detroit and LA. Is really fascinating to me. Like I used to be a concert promoter and I ran some big shows, but it was always in this kind of the same area. So I would never done touring or anything like that. It's really interesting because it does seem that when they get there, again, yeah, so the Forum, let's say it was 6,000 tickets. I don't know all these numbers like you guys do. The thing is, what was available was gone in 6 minutes, and that's incredibly successful. Then they'll release some more tickets, and then those will probably go partially because of the perception that it was sold out, but hey, there's a few more tickets. It seems to be a really wise move. And it's something that Dave was talking about, basically how Chicago is kind of AEW city now. And clearly Jacksonville is their city. Even though, they're definitely wearing some people out. I think we saw that recently in Chicago. And, it feels like they're locking down loyalty before they move on to new areas. And it's looking like that might be a really good move. It's frustrating for everybody who's not in those areas. Although, again, for me, most of my life, I was just like you, Paul. Like, if it's within 8 hours, I'm going. Like, I should have been going to all these Texas shows. Yeah. I've just not been able to recently. And so I'm really excited about them coming to New Orleans. I'm going to try and make that. And I have a feeling there's a lot of people around the country having conversations like this right now. Detroit, LA, like, hey, they're finally coming to the West Coast. And I'm actually really surprised it took so long, considering so many AEW wrestlers, including the Young Bucks, that's their personal territory.
All right, we have one question, then we're going to move to a couple of quick MMA things. So this is an interesting question from Corey Richmond. If already discussed, my bad. But how will it look to the Black fan base if Scorpio Sky is a 1 week champion for Wardlow? So I cannot speak for an entire fan base for sure. I am not African American. I think anybody used as a transitional champion is going to be frowned upon. For Tony Khan has spoken out on Twitter about these things, so the criticism will be there. I personally hope that Scorpio Sky does not lose the title, and that this is more of a storyline thing for Wardlow. So I don't think it's going to happen, but I did think it was an interesting booking moment, because there is a thought that he just put it on Scorpio Sky to lose to Wardlow. I don't think that's going to happen, but so sorry, Corey, can't really answer that question, but I will. It's hard for me to go like, oh, well, let's just talk to someone who's African American and an AEW fan, because then again, that person also cannot speak for the entire fan base. But that is something that is going to be interesting, and we'll have other folks on this show. And we could take the question there for sure. Okay, so I do have a couple of, and Daza.
Man,
I think Wardlow's not getting a title match next one, and very similar to Daza. I think so as well. So let's quickly go to two MMA topics, and James is perfect to talk about this stuff as well, because he's very well versed in the fighting. So I saw a couple quotes, and one of them was about Kayla Harrison. Now, I might be a little bit more, what is the right word? I love the idea of Kayla Harrison fighting. I don't like the idea of her only being in the PFL, because we'll never get to see if she could become a giant draw, a big star. She's basically in, I guess that you would technically call it the minor leagues, and maybe her skill level is sort of, maybe that's where she needs to be. But ultimately, I do think that there is, some star power that is being wasted by her being in the PFL. But she re-signed with them, so I wanted to ask you guys about this. So I'm going to read the quote. She says, I think there were a lot of contract negotiations. There were a lot of offers, many of them very lucrative. Ultimately, the PFL had the right to match any contract that I received, and they stepped up in a big way, and now I'm going to be staying. I'm excited. I talked to the owner. He made it very clear that the goals I have for myself, the way I want to challenge myself, is still going to be accomplished. The PFL supports me 100%. They're not afraid to pay big money and bring over big-name fighters to come over and challenge me. So two things stand out to me in that quote. One, Dana White must have not offered her very much money for the PFL to just be like, nope, we're matching that. So
UFC
maybe he
was
didn't
the
offer.
lowest offer.
Yeah, maybe he didn't offer at all. What does that say about what her prospects are? Because I think I don't know if we'd say a fair market or whatever, but she should be like one of the most highly sought out talents if the UFC was looking to, have some big matches up there. Now she's a little bit bigger than their weight classes, but James, what does that say about sort of the MMA business right now?
It tells me the UFC is not looking to make big matches, and they haven't been for a while, and that's a real issue that has plagued the UFC since they signed this deal with ESPN. They're kind of making the same money every pay-per-view no matter what. They don't have the incentive anymore to make John Jones, Stipe Miocic, John Jones, Francis Ngannou, or to bring in somebody like this who could be the next Ronda Rousey, and that she is, I think, better than Ronda was at most of the things Ronda was good at. She is a great promo. She's incredibly marketable. Everyone should want Kayla Harrison, and yes, she is
giant arms.
Yeah,
Oh,
and that's the other thing. Yeah, she's bigger. Yeah, it would be difficult. The UFC can find plenty of people to put against her. I think that's, of course, the Amanda Nunes match is one of the two dream matches along with Chris Cyborg over in Bellator. It makes sense that Bellator came hard for her and PFL matched. And to me, the idea that the PFL is going to be bringing in all these people to be opponents, who?
Yeah.
Like, who are these people? Because everyone is signed to either Bellator or the UFC who we want to see. And are they in a position on ESPN2 to really build big new opponents for Kayla Harrison? I think the answer is no. And I think if I were Kayla Harrison, which I am clearly not in any way, even remotely on her level in anything in life, if I were Kayla Harrison, I think I would have turned down the big money initially. And I'm assuming PFL did offer pretty decent money for the big money that could be down the road signing with the UFC. Because even if they're not paying that money right now, if you can put on some fantastic performances, cut a couple good promos talking to Joe Rogan, that big money could come down the road via pay-per-view bonuses, that sort of thing, and just the level of sponsorships you could get outside of the cage from that exposure. I just don't think it's the right move for Garrett. And even though she's making the more money right now, clearly it's a really disappointing move.
I bet you are a better podcaster than she is.
There's real potential there. To be fair, though, I don't think we've seen her. We've seen her chops yet, so who knows?
Okay, Paul. So the second piece of that quote that I thought was very interesting was kind of what James was alluding to, which was the opportunity to have these other matches. Now, does that mean Scott Coker would be interested in co-promoting? He hasn't shied away from that like the UFC has, and it makes zero sense for the UFC to do that. There's no reason why they should. But it's not like Bellator's knocking them out, in the box office either. What did you get out of that second part of her quote about bringing in big matches?
Well, I'm sure that's what they told her. I mean, Ryan's brought up a good point. Like, Cyborg's contract is just about up. So, they could potentially go to that match, even not having Bellator co-promote. The one name they brought in was Julia Budd, who is, a very good fighter. Her only two career losses, I think, were to Cyborg and Ronda Rousey. So, but the problem with Kayla Harrison is, I mean, you kind of hinted at it, Garrett. She is quite a bit bigger, I mean, than anybody else. So PFL built a whole weight class around her and brought in people that were 10 or 20 pounds lighter to fight up to get to her weight class. And she just mowed through the competition the last 3 years. And it's $1 million. Like, you win 3 or 4 matches and you win $1 million. So that's what she's getting. And basically it's like a free $1 million.
Easy money.
Yeah, and she literally in her fight promos, like James brought up how she's a good promo. She's an incredible promo. She says, that $1 million is mine. You guys are in my way. I'm just going to take you out, and then I'm going to collect my $1 million check at the end.
All right, it's like we hit the bat phone here, because you just talked about the great Ryan Frederick. He says Cyborg's Bellator deal is about to be up, so that potential fight isn't off the table. Yeah, so maybe that's the other piece of this.
That might be specifically what she was referring to in the second part of that. And I appreciate Ryan chiming in, because I didn't know that. So really appreciate that info.
In the Clinch MMA podcast on the Fight Game Media Network. You get all kinds of scoops from Ryan every week.
Best of the business.
Yep.
All right. So last question I have, we'll wrap it up with this. I was on the In the Clinch post show, and we were talking about one of the fights, which went 5 rounds and was probably should have been stopped, but the doctor kept coming in and it didn't get stopped. And it was sort of like the doctor's like, well, I'll leave it up to you, ref. And he's like, well, what do you think? And he's like, well, he can see. And so, we were kind of going over whether or not that should be stopped or not. And so there was another quote, and I will pull it up here from one Michael Bisping. He was on the MMA Hour, and he was talking about how the coaches don't really have the they're not protecting their fighters. And I forgot that I didn't, this isn't in the actual quote that I pulled, but he said something like they don't have the courage or something to stop these fights. And somebody who was a fighter and is now on the other side sees it from now a different perspective. But I guess the question to you guys is, because you guys know Michael and his work better than I do. Would Michael, the fighter, now Michael had real damage to his eye, right? Like he had a real injury which affected his career. Would the fighter, Michael Bisping, have the same quote, or is this Michael Bisping, who's got so many years under his belt, who sees things from a different perspective in a different context? And James, I'll start with you.
I love the question, Garrett. And as soon as you said it, I realized this is 100% right. I don't think the fighter Michael Bisping would ever say. This is a guy who kept secret that he basically had one eye for his last few MMA fights. He clearly was not interested in anyone protecting him. And I do think it's a real problem in MMA right now that people aren't willing to throw in the towel. But when's the last time we saw somebody significant throw in the towel? That was Deontay Wilder's corner, and that man was fired, was gone.
Mark Breland.
And that's a real shame, but that's what happens. And I think something else I really enjoyed that you said was how, like, the referee is talking to the doctor, like, should we stop the fight, blah, blah, blah. Like, years ago, I talked to the head of the Louisiana State Athletic Commission. He said one of the things they look for in referees were former law enforcement, people who are willing to make a decision at the snap of a finger, because you want people in there who are decisive. And that's what I was thinking about during that fight, is that no one was decisive. Nobody wanted that to rest on them, not the doctor, not the corner, not the referee. And that's a real problem. There needs to be people there there needs to be someone in MMA, anyone whose chief concern is the safety of the fighters, because even Moicano's opponent afterwards was talking about how they should have stopped the fight. And he was having to pull off the gas, and he got injured in the last round pulling off the gas, which is credit to Moicano. But my God, that was just a little bit of a shit show.
All right, Paul, wrap us up here with your thoughts.
Yeah, we talked about this quite a bit on the podcast, and Bisping, there's no way, like, he wouldn't stop, but he also recognized, and he's actually said it in the broadcast. He said, this is coming from somebody who fought with one eye, so keep this in mind. I just think that, clearly when you watch that fight on Saturday, the ref wanted to stop the fight, but he didn't want to be the one to make the call. So he was trying to get the doctor to do it. And the doctor was like, I'm not going to stop the fight. And so it's like, it's just the two of them. And meanwhile, this fighter, and the absolute worst thing that could have happened was his opponent ended up winning the 5th round. So now they feel like they're justified, and meanwhile, like, no, you're not justified. The guy took the round off and got hurt, like James mentioned. So it's just ridiculous. But it's never going to happen. Like, I've seen one, I think I saw a corner stoppage not that long ago. Ryan's got a great brain. Maybe he'll remind me later, but I mean, it's so few and far between, and literally almost every week there's one of these. And this was just a high profile one.
All right, let's talk about what everyone has on tap for content this week. So, James, are you going to have a guest host this week on the Boom?
Mike Gilbert. We're gonna be recording the show Saturday night. Really excited. Basically, look, every team in AEW broke up this week, every single one. And so I'm probably gonna start the show letting people know, like, I took this as my opportunity to boot out Kevin Ely, bring in Mike Gilbert. We're entering a whole new run. It's gonna be a lot of fun. I hope everybody will tune in to check that show out on Monday.
So Mike Gilbert, host of Brace for Impact with JD Oliva, which just went up. They have a cool gimmick with their show because they do the free version, which is just them talking about the Impact episode that just aired. They come out, they come back several hours later. And then on the Patreon, then they cover a lot more. So there's 2 versions. You get the free version, and then you get the Patreon version of Brace for Impact. So Kevin's got some work stuff going on. So Mike's going to step in, which is awesome. Thanks to Mike for doing that. And that podcast will be up sometime Monday in the afternoon after the wrap. The WWE podcast goes up. We put both of our AEW and WWE podcasts up on the same day. Okay, so Paul, you have 2 shows in addition to this one that you do with me now 3 times. In the Clinch with Ryan Frederick. We just saw Ryan. That will be up Monday night, Tuesday morning. And then you just put up the Dynamite show with Jeff Hawkins. And if people want to hear probably a little bit more full version of the conversation that we had to start this show, I know you talked about that in addition to breaking down a very newsworthy AEW Dynamite. Is there anything else that you want to plug before we get out of here?
I got the Grandpa Des show. I'm recording an episode later today. I've got 3 lined up over the next couple of weeks because I'm going to be taking a week off to go to Mania. And actually, Mike Gilbert, tentatively is scheduled to step in for me when I go to WrestleMania, although he's just got to see what his schedule is like. So maybe if he can't do it, I'll probably ask you, James.
And I'm in. If Mike's out, I'm in 100%.
We're making deals here at the end of the show. So thanks to both of you for doing this. I love the idea of this show just came to me because I was like, man, I don't have a show on this network. And I would love to do something. And let's analyze news. And so we've been able to do it. I still don't have a regular time. So I hope people are okay with sort of the varied time that this show comes out. But I wanted to do it on the stream as well, because we don't, we have a YouTube channel. We're trying to tie a podcast network and a YouTube channel and the different social medias and the Patreon. So it's a nice, fun puzzle to figure out. But thanks to both of you for doing this. For James, for Paul, I'm Double G. We'll see you when we see you. Peace out.